Welcome to the Deep Dive. Grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get comfortable with us here at Philosophy Hub, the Philosophy Cafe. Today, we're looking at a stack of sources centered around a very uncomfortable but incredibly vital question.
Yes, it really is a vital one.
Right, it's this idea that in our modern rush to understand our pain and our trauma, are we accidentally trapping ourselves in diagnostic labels? And before we get into the heavy lifting, if you find yourself having an aha moment during our conversation today, we naturally invite you to support our mission. Liking and sharing this deep dive with friends or colleagues who might benefit from these profound insights is simply the best way to keep the cafe thriving.
Absolutely.
So our core text today is Scott Barry Kaufman's 2025 book, Rise Above, Overcome the Victim Mentality, Empower Yourself. And our goal is to explore that razor-thin line between validating the very real pain we experience and slipping into a mindset where that pain becomes our entire identity. Okay, let's unpack this. We live in an era where mental health awareness is higher than ever, which is wonderful.
It is a profound shift forward, yes.
But Kaufman's work, along with the other research in our notes, suggests a pretty massive cultural side effect. Are we unintentionally building cages out of our diagnoses?
That is the pivotal tension we are exploring today, and it is a true pleasure to sit down and synthesize this with you. To begin, I think we must establish a foundational truth, so there is absolutely no misunderstanding. Trauma is very real. The suffering people endure in this world is undeniable.
Definitely.
However, the core insight running through Kaufman's work and the broader psychological literature is that while we cannot always control the adversity that strikes us, our belief about that adversity ultimately shapes our destiny. It is our cognitive framework, how we actively narrate our own suffering to ourselves, that dictates whether an experience becomes a lifelong prison or a painful yet transformative catalyst for growth.
That distinction really sets the stage, and it brings us to a major trend the sources highlight, which is this modern cultural hyper-focus on concepts like tiny traumas or emotional neglect.
Yes, that has become incredibly prevalent.
We're seeing this everywhere right now, especially online. It seems like modern culture almost encourages you to look back into your childhood with a magnifying glass, actively searching for minor slights. You know, you hear things like, my parents were always busy working, or they didn't smile at me enough when I was a toddler.
Right, pathologizing normal life.
Exactly. And suddenly, that becomes the definitive, unchangeable reason why someone feels unmotivated in their 30s. It's this instinct to find a past culprit for a current lack of momentum.
It is a pervasive cultural shift, and it requires careful analysis. To understand what is happening here, we have to look at the work of researchers like George Bonanno, who specializes in the study of human resilience. Bonanno argues that trauma does not automatically equal PTSD.
Which goes against a lot of what you see on social media.
Completely. In fact, he prefers the term potential traumatic events. You see, an event in itself, whether it is a job loss, a difficult childhood, or a sudden accident, does not have a predetermined, rigid outcome on the human psyche. The event is potentially traumatic.
So it's not a guarantee.
Precisely. The actual outcome is heavily mitigated by the individual's cognitive flexibility, their inherent resilience, and how they contextualize the event. When we start pathologizing normal human adversity, when we label every discomfort or parental imperfection as a literal trauma, we risk diminishing our own innate psychological immunity. We're essentially programming ourselves to be fragile.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like we're actively searching for a medical diagnosis so we can hand over our agency. The sources point out that people are clinging to labels, things like ADHD, borderline, PTSD, or even identifying as a highly sensitive person, as if these labels are life sentences written in stone.
Exactly. This raises an important question. What happens to the human mind when a clinical label becomes a core identity? It becomes a modern psychological trap.
A trap that feels comfortable at first, I imagine.
Yes, because it offers relief. But when a person adopts a diagnosis as the fundamental truth of who they are, their cognitive flexibility plummets. Instead of saying, I sometimes struggle with focus and need strategies, they say, I am ADHD, therefore I cannot focus. The label creates a rigid box.
And then you're stuck in it.
It offers a temporary sense of relief, a concrete reason for the struggle, but it very often transitions into a permanent excuse for stagnation. You become a passive victim of a category rather than an active participant in your own development.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources explicitly argue that psychological labels were originally designed to provide understanding. They're supposed to be tools to help you grow, like a map out of the woods. But instead, people are using them as ammunition against themselves. They use them to judge themselves, or they turn them into a rigid identity they feel they could never, ever escape.
A map is meant to guide you out, not confine you to the forest. But when you fuse your identity with the label of a victim, you step into very complex, often destructive psychological territory. You stop looking for the exit. This brings us to a fascinating diagnostic tool used by psychologists to measure exactly this kind of mindset, which Kaufman discusses at length.
Yes, the psychological entitlement scale.
Yeah.
The sources brought up this incredible questionnaire by researcher W. Keith Campbell, and there was one specific question that just blew my mind. It's called the Titanic question. Can you walk us through what that is and what it's actually measuring?
Gladly. The Titanic question literally asks participants to agree or disagree with this statement. If I were on the Titanic, I deserve to be among the first on the lifeboats.
Which is just a wild thing to admit to on paper.
It is. It is measuring a deeply innate, unearned belief that I am inherently more valuable than others. But what's fascinating here is how Kaufman adapts that very premise to explain modern victimhood. Well, traditional narcissism, the kind we usually think of, says, I deserve the lifeboat because I am the smartest, the richest, or the most attractive person here. But Kaufman introduces the concept of vulnerable narcissism. This is an entirely different and, in many ways, more insidious presentation.
A vulnerable narcissism. That sounds almost contradictory.
It does. A vulnerable narcissist says, if I were on the Titanic, I deserve to be among the first on the lifeboats because I have suffered more than anyone else.
Wait, let me pause you there, because when I hear the word narcissist, I picture a CEO demanding a corner office or an influencer taking selfies. I definitely don't picture someone who is hurting or struggling. How does victimhood actually translate into narcissism?
That is the paradox that makes it so difficult to spot. Vulnerable narcissists feel entitled to special treatment, exemptions from normal rules, and constant validation specifically because they have adopted the identity of the ultimate victim.
They weaponize their pain.
Yes. They harbor the toxic belief that no one can possibly understand my unique problems because if someone else did understand, or if they healed, they wouldn't be special anymore. The suffering itself becomes the source of their uniqueness and their leverage over other people.
It's like their pain becomes a VIP pass to skip the lawn of normal human responsibility.
Precisely. And the research backing the destructive nature of this mindset is quite striking. The text highlights a series of studies conducted by researcher Emily Zetek, who examined how feelings of victimization impact everyday behavior. She found that when individuals are simply reminded of past injustices or times life was unfair to them, they actually behave significantly more selfishly in subsequent unrelated tasks.
Really? Just being reminded of it changes their behavior?
Yes. For example, if they are asked to divide money or resources in a lab setting, people who have just been primed with their own victimhood will keep more for themselves and cooperate far less. The internal subconscious logic is, the world owes me, so I am justified in taking what I want right now.
It's chilling to think that remembering a wrong makes us act wrongly toward others. And if you scale that up, take that hostility and combine it with other traits, you get a really dangerous cocktail, don't you? The sources call it the dark triad of vulnerable narcissism.
Yes, the dangerous trio. It consists of neuroticism, which is a state of constant anxiety and emotional instability, hostility, which is a simmering, chronic anger toward the world, and entitlement, the unwavering belief that one is owed reparation.
Anxiety, anger, and entitlement.
Exactly. When you mix constant anxiety with chronic anger and a demand for special treatment, you don't just get a sad person, you get a highly volatile, reactive individual. And what is most troubling is that this trio frequently hides behind what the sources call the dark ego vehicle principle.
The dark ego vehicle. I read that in the notes, and it sounds like a supervillain's car. What exactly is happening there?
It is the ultimate psychological camouflage. The dark ego vehicle is when someone takes all that unresolved hostility and entitlement and masks it by adopting a moral, righteous, or social justice ideology. The text gives a brilliant, albeit disturbing example of extreme animal hoarding.
Right, where someone packs 50 sick animals into a tiny, unsanitary house.
Yes. Ostensibly, they tell themselves and the world that they are a savior and that everyone else in society is cruel and indifferent. But in reality, it is a vehicle for their own dark ego.
So the animals are just props for their ego.
In many ways, yes. It gives them a righteous excuse to hoard control, to punish society, and to elevate themselves as morally superior, all without ever having to feel an ounce of guilt or look at their own underlying anger. They are no longer a hostile, difficult person. They are a crusader. Anyone who questions their methods is immediately labeled an oppressor.
And we see this dynamic playing out publicly every single day, especially on social media. The sources talk about TikTok trauma or performative vulnerability. People are broadcasting their miseries, their diagnostic labels, and their tiny traumas online to millions of strangers. But it doesn't seem like it's for genuine connection. It feels like a performance demanding special treatment or social status.
It is the commodification of suffering. When vulnerability becomes a broadcast performance, it ceases to be a bridge between human beings. It becomes a currency for attention and social dominance. This state is very often fueled by a cognitive habit that psychologists measure using the anger rumination scale.
What does anger rumination look like in a practical sense?
It is the endless, obsessive mental replay of past conflicts. It is lying in bed at 2 a.m, relitigating an argument you had with a coworker 5 years ago.
I think we've all been guilty of that at least once.
We have. But for someone trapped in this cycle, it is a constant state of being. It is obsessing over revenge, drafting angry emails in your head that you never send, and holding on to old grievances as if they are precious heirlooms. This habit actively destroys a person's cognitive flexibility.
It just locks them into the past.
It carves deep, negative trenches in the mind, making it nearly impossible to see new solutions or experience joy in the present moment.
It sounds incredibly exhausting. But what I appreciate about these sources is that they don't just leave us in the dark, they offer a way out. If vulnerable narcissism and anger rumination are the trap, they introduce a contrasting concept called SNU, the sense of need for uniqueness. The text frames this as a kind of positive narcissism, which honestly sounds like an oxymoron. How can narcissism be positive?
It does seem contradictory at first because we are conditioned to view all narcissism as pathological. However, a healthy sense of need for uniqueness, or SNU, is about striving to be distinct without stepping on others to get there.
So it's about adding to the world rather than taking from it.
Yes. When people feel entitled to take up space in the world, not because they are a wounded victim owed a debt, but simply because they believe they have a unique, distinct perspective to offer, they become remarkably generative. They want to build something.
And the research shows it actually makes them more creative, right? The sources mentioned something called the remote associates test to measure this. How does a word puzzle connect to our sense of uniqueness?
The remote associates test is a classic psychological tool used to measure creative problem solving. You are given 3 seemingly unrelated words and asked to find the common link. The example in the text was Swiss, cake, and cottage.
And the answer there is cheese. Swiss cheese, cheesecake, cottage cheese.
Exactly. The research demonstrates that people who possess a healthy desire to be distinct, who embrace their individuality without hostility or a victim narrative, score significantly higher on these creative tests.
They just think more expansively.
They are able to connect disparate ideas. Victim-based entitlement leads to sabotage, selfishness, and narrow thinking. But a healthy need for uniqueness leads to innovation. You are using your mental energy to create something new rather than demanding compensation for the past.
That is a massive pivot. Are you building or are you demanding? But as we navigate away from victimhood, I think we really need to slow down here. We have to be incredibly careful not to swing to the opposite extreme of just dismissing people's pain. I was reading the notes on Rabbi Harold Kushner, and it completely shifted the tone of this entire deep dive for me. Can you walk us through what happened to him?
I can. It is an agonizing, unfathomable story, but a necessary one to ground our discussion. Harold Kushner was a rabbi who wrote the famous, widely read book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People.
Such a powerful book.
It is. He wrote this book after facing every parent's absolute worst nightmare. He lost his 14-year-old son, Aaron, to a rare, rapid-aging genetic disease called progeria. By the time young Aaron passed away, his body was essentially that of an elderly man.
It's just heartbreaking, unimaginable.
It is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of our conversation today, Kushner's reflections on this tragedy offer an incredibly grounded lesson in honoring pain without romanticizing it. Because of his unimaginable loss, Kushner did become a world-renowned counselor.
He used his pain to help others.
He developed deep empathy and became a spiritual pillar for millions of people navigating their own grief. He achieved immense spiritual and psychological growth.
But the realization he shared later, he admitted that yes, his son's death made him a deeper, wiser person. But he stated unequivocally that he would give up all of that spiritual growth, every single piece of wisdom he gained in a heartbeat, just to have his son back.
And that is the absolute unvarnished truth of trauma. As specialists and educators, we must emphatically warn against the dangers of toxic positivity.
You can't just slap a happy face on tragedy.
Ever. We must never look at someone's devastation and tell them this is a gift in disguise or everything happens for a reason. Trauma is not a gift, it is agonizing. It takes things away that can never ever be replaced. The goal of psychological resilience is not to pretend the tragedy was secretly a good thing. The goal is to figure out how to continue living, how to carry that immense weight without letting the role of victim consume the entirety of your remaining identity.
So what does this all mean? How do we hold that devastating reality while still refusing to be trapped by it? Before we get into the solutions, the text brought up this concept called antimattering, which was coined by the physicist Paul Dirac. It sounds incredibly bleak. What does that actually look like for someone trapped in a victim mindset?
Paul Dirac struggled immensely with his own mental health, and antimattering is the profound feeling of total insignificance. It is the deep-seated belief that you do not matter, that you are invisible, and that if you were to disappear tomorrow, the universe would not even notice.
That's heavy.
It is the dark gravity of victimhood. When you feel you don't matter, you stop trying to affect the world positively.
So how does the listener actively break free from that dark gravity?
It requires actionable shifts in our internal philosophy. The sources provide 4 specific frameworks for true empowerment. Let's look at the first one, which comes from the neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett. You must separate fault from responsibility.
That sounds tough to swallow for someone who's been genuinely wronged.
It is incredibly difficult, but vital. To use an analogy, if someone runs a red light and rear-ends your car, it is absolutely not your fault. You did not ask for it.
Right, you were just sitting there.
However, you are still the one who has to take the car to the mechanic. It is entirely your responsibility to fix your life. No one else can do the psychological push-ups for you.
Not your fault, but your responsibility to heal. I love that. What's the second framework?
The second comes from organizational psychologist Tasha Eurich, shifting from why to what. When we suffer, we naturally ask, why am I so miserable? Why did this happen to me? Why did my boss say that?
Which sounds exactly like the anger rumination we were talking about earlier, just spins you in a circle.
Exactly. Why is a spiral that looks backward? Instead, Eurich suggests we must ask what. What can I do right now, in this exact moment, to move one step forward? What is in my control today?
Just focusing on the next right action?
Yes. What is action-oriented and looks to the future?
That breaks the rumination cycle instantly. And the third framework?
The third is rooted in the humanistic psychology of Carl Rogers, the paradox of acceptance. Rogers famously noted, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change.
Oh, so I don't have to hate my current state to be motivated to escape it.
Precisely. We often believe that self-flagellation is the fuel for self-improvement, but self-hatred is exhausting. When you accept that you are flawed, that you carry trauma, and that you are imperfect, but fundamentally enough, your psychological defenses drop.
It's a surrender of the fight against yourself.
You stop fighting your own reality, and genuine growth can finally begin. You don't have to be perfect to move forward.
You just have to be enough. And that leads to the fourth and final framework, which is about where we source our self-worth. The sources note that if we build our self-worth on external metrics, our abilities, our physical attractiveness, or our bank accounts, we are building a house on quicksand.
Indeed. According to the research of Stephen Hine, individuals who predicate their self-worth on transient things like wealth or beauty frequently encounter crises of meaning when those things inevitably fade.
Because they always fade eventually.
They do. True, resilient self-worth is built on deep, meaningful, warm social connections. It is about how you relate to others, how you contribute to your community, and the love you cultivate. When your identity is tethered to human connection rather than a victim narrative or a list of personal attributes, you achieve a level of psychological flexibility that allows you to weather almost any storm.
That really brings it all together beautifully. To summarize everything we've unpacked today, I want to thank you for guiding us through this heavy, complex landscape. We've looked at the very real nature of trauma, the absolute dangers of getting stuck in vulnerable narcissism and anger rumination, and the actionable paths, like separating fault from responsibility toward genuine emotional agility.
It has been a deeply meaningful conversation.
To you, the listener, the world can be heartbreakingly unfair. But clinging to the victim label as your primary identity only restricts your own freedom. it limits your creativity, your relationships, and your future.
It truly does. And as we close this session, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to ponder as you step back out into the world. Imagine for a moment that it is possible. If the story of your past suffering was completely erased from your identity today, who would you choose to become tomorrow?
What a striking question to end on. From all of us here at the Philosophy Cafe, we wish you peace, courage, and continued growth. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time.